Bela Lugosi, Christopher Lee, Gary Oldman, that guy that played Nosferatu. These actors have helped shape the image of Dracula over the course of many decades. Whenever versions of Dracula are used, whether they be accurate versions of the character or parodies of the famed icon of horror, they draw some influence from these famous portrayals by these actors. Whether you've seen their films or not, you know the classic tropes of Dracula that these actors have formed. Whenever we see a parody of Count Dracula in any form of media, the character will generally have exaggerated characteristics of those actors, from how they talk to their attire. So which characters use these traits to create the best parody of Dracula? Let's find out. And this will only count parodies of Dracula, so no general vampires or serious interpretations of Dracula in different environments, like Dracula in Castlevania, Alucard in Hellsing, or Dracula that time he fought Batman. So here are the top 10 characters that parody Dracula. Number 10. Count Chocula. Despite how iconic he is, as a Dracula parody, there isn't too much unique about him. He's just the standard Bela Lugosi Dracula with an outfit that basically is unchanged from the standard Dracula outfit, with the exception of it mostly being brown to match the color of his chocolate cereal. And his parody name is creative? They replaced the first syllable of Dracula with the first syllable of chocolate. Brilliant! You can't get any more clever than that. Really, all the Munster cereals have this same pattern of names? Hey, why don't we replace Stein in Frankenstein's monster with the word berry? Hey, for the ghost, why don't we make a pun on... Actually, this one is kinda clever. Count Chocula also gets scared off too easily. In every commercial with him, Frankenberry, and sometimes Booberry, they're usually arguing over which cereal is best. In these commercials, nearly everything scares Count Chocula and also Frankenberry. It could be children, to pumpkins, to even his other mascot friend of Booberry, even though it is clearly established that they know each other. Do you want to get promoted to whatever is one level above cereal mascot? Number 9. Monster Mash Dracula. Alright, fine, he's actually just normal Dracula in a more fun-loving world where mad scientists create monsters that love to dance rather than have an existential crisis on who they are. Technically, this is the real Dracula, but the manner in which he is portrayed is in no way what Bram Stoker had in mind when he created Count Dracula. Also, the singer calls him Drac, which means this is a more laid-back Dracula who is fine with nicknames. Dracula shows he likes to dance in this song when he did the mash. He did the Monster Mash. The Monster Mash. From what I've heard, it was a graveyard smash, as they call it, but I was not there, so I cannot confirm nor deny that. There are also a few other details of this dance, but that's not for today. Number 8. Count Koopula from the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. This was back when no one really knew what direction the Super Mario Bros. Franchise was going in, so when they created a kids cartoon for it, they basically said we're having Mario, Luigi, the Princess, and Toad go to random places to foil the plan of the evil Bowser, or King Koopa as he was known at the time, using power-ups similar to what you would find in Super Mario Bros. Each episode brought our heroes to a new location with a different theme. You could probably guess, but this episode is Dracula-themed in Turtlevania, where King Koopa was Count Koopula for some reason. I really mean for some reason as vaguely as possible, since the characters clearly know who King Koopa is, have a history with him, and basically ask, oh, what's he up to this time, implying that it's completely normal for him to all of a sudden be Dracula for the sake of some evil plan, and I mean he's really Dracula. This is not some act. He can turn into a bat, he can be killed with sunlight, he can't go near garlic, and he controls an army of were-turtles. All while the crew treats this as if he's just going through the motions of some flawed evil plan, not wondering how he got these supernatural powers since they last met, and completely accepting the fact that they can just use Dracula weaknesses to defeat him. I mean, the crew eats cloves of garlic to defeat him with halitosis. Have fun digesting that plan, oh boy. Oh, by the way, Count Koopula doesn't drink blood. They replaced that with tomato sauce. This all started when one of King Koopa's minions stole Mario's spaghetti leftovers, likely for the tomato sauce. So in reality, this all could have been avoided if Mario was not hungry. Number 7. Vincent the Vampire, or Dracula Man, from Dragon Ball. In anime, it's easy to find something that references Dracula and vampires, like Alucard from Hellsing or characters from Vampire Hunter D. But it's hard to find what can be considered a parody. However, if we turn to our friends at Dragon Ball, we'll find an alright anime parody of Dracula in Dracula Man, as he's known in the Japanese version. That's basically saying he's the martial artist version of Dracula. Of course, he doesn't look like any famous Dracula iterations, so I'm really placing all the weight on his name. Anyway, in the context of the episode in which he appeared, the group of fighters needs fortune teller Baba to tell them where one of the Dragon Balls is located with her psychic powers. However, they cannot pay her, but she agrees to tell them if they defeat her 5 fighters, the first 4 of which are horror-themed, and the first 3 of which are based on the universal horror monsters. The first being Dracula Man, the second one is the Invisible Man, and the third one is for the Mummy. Dracula Man has all the normal traits of Dracula, minus the suave cloak and cool looks. He is also a kickboxer. His key Dracula traits are turning into a bat and sucking blood, which he uses to his advantage to beat Krillin, a main character, in less than 5 minutes. He does lose any shred of imaginary cool points when you learn he was the only character in the anime to lose to a boy with garlic breath and Poir, the shape-shifting flying cat. Granted, it was pretty funny how Poir turned into a giant hand to swat Dracula as if he was an insect, so while the traits of Dracula helped him fight, they were also the reason he lost. And if that Dracula isn't Dracula enough for you, Dragon Ball Z saw a more traditional version of Dracula in the movie Fusion Reborn, where at one point a portal to hell is opened up, releasing all the villains from the past and some non-DBZ characters, one of which is one known as Count Drac, who was walking around asking people to remove the stake from his heart. So there's a Dracula in the Dragon Ball universe for everyone! Number 6. Vincent the Vegetable Vampire from the Electric Company. So here we have a character on a show aimed at young children, but what this Dracula imitator has that others lack is he is played by Morgan Freeman. Not only that, but everything Vincent says is in song. All of his segments on the Electric Company involve Morgan Freeman's magical voice singing us goofy songs that show us alliteration and other words to improve our vocabulary and such. He's a kid-friendly version of Dracula that sucks the juices out of veggie victims rather than harming humans. Sometimes he goes by the name Dracula in appearances where he doesn't sing, which brings up the question, is Vincent the twin brother of the real Dracula, or is this just a coincidence? Is Dracula actually Vincent under an alias to hide the fact that he is, well, Dracula? I feel that hypothesizing this may open up another question that I cannot answer, though. Number 5. Dracula from Dracula, Dead and Loving It. This is a Mel Brooks spoof on Dracula with airplane actor Leslie Nielsen playing Dracula. I think you have a recipe for success here, except the fact that the movie was universally panned and it was a Mel Brooks movie that is best forgotten. That being said, Leslie Nielsen actually plays a pretty good Dracula. If this was a serious movie, he may have actually been able to pull it off, especially since the movie's humor came from the world around Dracula or someone in reaction to Dracula rather than Dracula himself. Number 4. All those duck-themed Dracula characters. I can't specify one since there are more duck-themed Dracula characters than you'd expect. The number I'd expect is 0, or maybe 1 because I'd wonder why someone is asking me about a specific type of Dracula, but there are 4 duck-themed Dracula of note. That's not an overwhelming number, but duck-themed Dracula is not what I'd call a common trope in horror. Anyway, the first of them is from 1979 with Chocula, a short-lived cartoon character that was basically Dracula if he was a duck and engaged in wacky antics and standard slapstick. Nothing really special about him other than the predictable yet still amusing pun name he has. I don't care how lame people think it is, if I was the first person to create a Duck Dracula, I would claim that pun name. There's also Chocula from the Marvel Comics parody called Spider-Ham, but sadly it appears that someone beat the writer to the punch with that pun name in a widely distributed piece of entertainment. Next is Count Duckula from the 80s cartoon of the same name. He's Dracula if you reverse some of his most famous attributes. Like, instead of biting people to suck blood, he's a vegetarian. Instead of being a dastardly fellow, he's actually a nice guy. And instead of being a human vampire, he's a duck vampire. Ducks are the opposite of humans, right? Finally, there is that Dracula duck from the DuckTales video game. As with DuckTales, nearly every character is based off the classic Disney duck design. This Dracula duck is the final boss of the game. It was never seen in the DuckTales cartoon series to my knowledge, so there is not much else to say about him. He's just your typical end boss with a Dracula theme. He teleports with a pattern and summons many bats. Number 3. Dimitri Maximoff from Darkstalkers. His character is meant to be taken seriously, but if you're a character in the Darkstalkers universe, you'll have some pretty silly attributes considering everybody is based off some classic horror tropes. Dimitri's style is akin to what we'd expect the real Count Dracula to have, and he has a similar goal. Dimitri basically wants ultimate power. You know, take over the world, that kind of mindset. He wants control of the Makai dimension rather than the human world though, which is actually what he's banished to during his fight with his enemy Belial Aisland. Forced to spend a century in exile, he emerged learning his arch-enemy was dead, so he went to claim the Makai dimension. One problem though, scary demon guy has a daughter, and now Dimitri has to face daddy's little princess Morgan. And she caused more problems than just giving him another enemy to fight. See, Dimitri is technically the main character of the Darkstalkers fighting game franchise, but having the title of main character doesn't mean you're the most recognizable or even top priority when representing the franchise. No, this is where Morgan rears her pesky bats and basically took over the franchise. If someone has never heard of Darkstalkers, you'd likely assume it only had to do with Morgan. She always is the main guest character that represents Darkstalkers in Capcom crossovers. Even when Dimitri is included, like in the poster for Darkstalkers Resurrection, Morgan is front and center, which basically implies she is the main character. So yeah, maybe we know why Dimitri is so evil. He just wanted the attention he deserved. Number 2. The Count from Sesame Street. His full name is Count Von Count. Here we have another character from a TV show aimed at a young audience, so there isn't much deep detail I can go into with the Count's character development. The Count's backstory is he's a version of Dracula based off the Bela Lugosi portrayal who loves to count, sometimes preventing others from completing simple tasks just because he needs to count any number of things related to said situation. This does not strain his relationship, luckily, with his friends since they understand his main purpose in life. His existence is based on the concept of a single pun. However, he does have some sort of supernatural power of summoning thunder and lightning after he finishes counting and does his signature laugh. And if he were here right now, he would just have to count to 1, because that's where we are. Number 1. Grandpa Munster from the Munsters. Considering the Munsters are your normal sitcom family, Grandpa Munster is just your typical grandfather in sitcoms. He mocks his son-in-law, he's stubborn but still wise, and arguably, he could be the legitimate Dracula just at an older age. Looking at classic horror tropes, besides being Dracula, he is also a mad scientist. He creates all sorts of experiments that aren't the greatest, but they do make for some good plot lines when something goes wrong or even right. Grandpa Munster's legacy actually surpassed that of the Munsters for a period of time. While most of the Munster actors didn't keep portraying their characters after the Munsters' main run in the 1960s, actor Al Lewis kept on playing Grandpa Munster outside of the attempted revivals of the series, mainly in the bumpers for the channel TBS when they had their Super Scary Saturday Movies, which was a monster or horror-themed movie presentation. Different movies had different intros presented by Al Lewis as Grandpa Munster. He also plays a role in the Atari game Midnight Mutants from 1990. His face was featured right on the cover. Interestingly, both these portrayals had the character just called Grandpa. This may have meant there were copyright issues in calling him Grandpa Munster, or referencing the Munsters in general outside of the series when Al Lewis dressed as a Dracula character. In a way, it might have been weird if you had never heard of the Munsters before seeing Grandpa Munster outside the series, and just having this man come up to you and introducing himself as Grandpa. Anyway, those are my top 10 characters that parody Count Dracula. Are there any characters worth mentioning I didn't talk about? Let me know in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.